So this week we're going to look at chapter 6, the losses of young and middle adulthood. And this is particularly interesting for our class because these are the people who are in the workforce and the people that you're going to be interacting with most frequently. One of the theories that underpins how we look at what we do in adulthood is Erickson's model of development. And so the idea is that between the ages of 20 and 65, there are a series of tasks and developmental milestones that we strive to meet. And when loss comes into play and interrupts our ability to meet those milestones or makes them more complicated, then that has an impact on us and our development. So we're influenced by things that happen to us individually and also what's happening in the world. So if you think about what's happened in the last 2 years, it is going to influence everybody who is in this stage. And of course, it influences everybody whether you're in this stage or not. But we're focusing on what happens in this particular age group. The pandemic, profound impact. I have friends who are parents of young children and trying to work full time while having their kids at home because they can't attend school and trying to manage the upset associated with not being at school has been just profoundly difficult for them. The Me Too movement, that certainly triggered many people around their own history of assaults in the workplace and difficult situations that they've encountered in their life. So that was very triggering. The Black Lives Matter movement, Indigenous people, all the things that have come to light in just in the past summer with unearthing bodies of children from residential schools. This is profoundly impactful to people. So, all of these things that are happening in the broader context can create symbolic, and also there are tangible losses for people as well. So, people could have lost someone in the pandemic. All of these things are influencing our developmental life course and the decisions about what we're doing in our lives. So, I also know people who are changing careers or taking a step back from the workforce simply because of how the pandemic has shaped what they feel about what's important in their life. So there's some additional factors that impact our reactions to loss in this time frame, and that is that most of us in this age group have multiple roles and responsibilities. So you're already physically and emotionally taxed. Sometimes, the way we have others perceiving us influences how we respond. So if we feel that we are, the breadwinner of the family, the one who earns the most money, then perhaps we keep our feelings about a loss hidden because we don't want others to feel shaken by that. And certainly in this age group, as we talked about right back in our early modules, um, we're more likely to be diagnosed with a difficult illness. So, something to think about is that every young and middle adult will experience the death of someone they know, every single one. So, that again is something to think about because all these people are in the workplace. Another influence that's significant for this age group is pretty well, certainly in the younger part of this cohort, they've grown up with digital narratives. So your life plays out on Facebook and LinkedIn and TikTok and other areas, and technology is part of your life. So, you're seeing the news really very easily and regularly, and so you're hearing about all kinds of deaths and disasters around the world. So that has an impact. You're seeing when your friends and family members have losses. It's communicated through the network, and then you also see people reacting to those losses. And as a mourner, you have so much less control than you used to over how you disseminate information. So in some ways it's helpful, but in other ways it's not. And I'll just share with you, I would say probably about 15 years ago, I was working with an organization that had one of their beloved employees. He was a new father. and a young man, he was in his 20s, was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he was in hospital receiving treatments. And the company was small. So they did need their workforce to remain focused on meeting client expectations, but they were very mindful that everybody was profoundly impacted by their colleague being sick. So one of the things they were struggling with was that this individual was sending out regular tweets and notifications to people and updating them on his condition. And so that would create another round of people feeling sad and down. And they really didn't know how to manage this. So this is a new feature of what you have to manage in a workplace. Um, if you have one of your employees who's sick, you actually cannot control the messaging that that person might be sending out. And so these are other things that you have to think about now when it comes to grief in the workplace. There's some common symbolic and tangible losses in addition to everything we've just discussed, and that is more likely you're going to have your parents die, spouse, child. Divorce is still very common. Your child may be diagnosed with a disability, perhaps they're diagnosed with a learning disability. That can create grief for parents. Young people with mental health disorders, and again, as I mentioned, being diagnosed yourself with a serious illness. So if we look at the particular age group, so young adulthood being 20 to 40 years old, this is one of the most exciting and challenging periods in a person's life. So many of you are probably in this cohort, right? You're making major decisions about your job, where you're going in life, choosing a partner, are you going to have children, not have children? It could also be the first time that you become truly responsible for another person. And so, certainly, everybody in this age group can understand death, but because you have so many multiple demands going on, it can distract people from putting your time and energy into grief and looking after yourself during this time. The developmental factors going on for people are, you are expected to be self sufficient at this stage in your life, that you are developing life plans, that you're creating your own family separate from your family of origin, and that you have this expanding network of roles and coping strategies. So, those are all the developmental factors that are going on. Now, we also know that single parenting is very common and it is so stressful. And you think about during the pandemic, single parents who are working, having to support their children at school when school's gone virtual, and having everything on them, this tremendously stressful. Um, that there are lots of symbolic losses that are associated with a serious illness diagnosis. And certainly your own cultural and spiritual values and beliefs, practices are going to come into play here. So, how do people react to loss? So, again, I have to say that loss is such, and grief is such an individual reaction. But here are some things that can come up just specific to this age group would be feeling very responsible for other family members. Um, you know, n- Not always wanting to put your own needs first. Maybe you have a young family and you're putting their needs first. And we do see mental health issues starting to emerge in this age group, irrespective of reacting to loss. So I can speak to this personally that I was in my early 40s when my younger brother died, and it was a very sudden death. And instantly, I felt responsible for taking care of my parents. They were absolutely devastated, absolutely devastated. And so I felt like I had to fill in the gap for my brother being missing. He also had a young family. He had a 4-year-old and an 18-month old. And so I also felt like, oh, I've got to jump in and help there too. And so this feeling of being responsible to help other family members is very common in this stage of life. And then middle adulthood, which is the tail end of that time, they're known as the sandwich generation, right? You are raising and launching children and caring for older family members. And I can certainly speak to that at this stage in my life now, having cared for two of our in-laws who had declining health. Um, you may have developed leadership roles in your community, you've risen higher in an organization, and of course, just all the biological changes that go on with aging. In terms of developmental factors, at this point in your life, you start to re-examine what have you done, and you're trying to reform your identity. Um, Again, the multiple roles and responsibilities are coming into play, and you've got long established patterns that may be very difficult to change. So, someone who's had lifelong substance abuse issues, it's difficult to change them at this point in their life, and certainly, again, the vulnerability to medical disorders. So reactions to loss here is you could have a pileup. And I can again speak personally to say in the during the pandemic and just before my husband has lost both his parents, and he cared for both of them up until their death. So this is profound for him. Um, Again, when we talk about having maladaptive patterns of coping with things, this is where this could actually be heightened if you're having multiple losses. And, on the positive, there is what's called a generative stage of development where you're looking to how can you help others. So, there may be for some people reaching out to others helps them cope with their own loss. And again, the religion or spiritual practices can be comforting. How do you make meaning from the loss? So thinking that these people are going to be in your workforce and, as the leader, you're going to set the tone for how others on your team support these individuals. If you have the comfort to acknowledge the loss and acknowledge grief reactions as being normal, this is very helpful. So I always say to people, if someone has a loss in their life, just acknowledge it. Even if you feel tongue-tied and don't know what to say, I'm so sorry for your loss. Is better to say that, especially in a workforce, than nothing. If you say nothing, then that individual knows that you said nothing, and then forevermore, you're sort of frozen. You've got this unspeakable situation that's occurred between the two of you, and it doesn't go away. Being able to just listen, um, and provide support by just being there. This is tremendous. You don't have to provide an answer. You're just being helpful. Um, this one is really interesting. If you as a leader say to someone, let's say their parent has died, take whatever time you need. You may feel like, well, I can't say that because they're going to take weeks and weeks and weeks. I can assure you they won't. Many, many people after they've had a significant loss in their life, the one place where they feel a little bit normal is in the workplace. And so they really want to hold on to that job. And just saying to someone, look, take whatever time you need is a very comforting statement. And it lets them know that you care and that you're willing to be flexible. And in terms of outside the office or even inside the office, offers of help. So, another friend of mine, when her child was murdered, um, everybody in her office took charge of meals for that family for months. She didn't cook anything. Someone at her organization stepped forward, got everyone organized, and meals were delivered to her house every single day. So these are just some of the tangible things that you can do, but just your presence, acknowledging the loss, being available to just listen is huge for someone.